see him in the chat.
There he is, yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right, well, it's 6:30, so I guess we should get started. So I'd just like to thank everyone for joining this event. So my name is Damon Libby, and I'm the Digital Communications Lead, and I'm also a researcher for the Trail Society of British Columbia. I'm currently residing on the unceded territory of the Syilx people. Thank you so much for attending this event. We wouldn't be able to host events like these without people such as yourselves participating. So on behalf of the Trail Society of British Columbia, thank you. I'd like to start off this event by letting everyone know just some of the ongoing projects that we're working on and how it connects to this presentation. So we're currently working on a project called the Greenways for All project, which looks at barriers and access related issues specific to rural communities in British Columbia. So my role in this project as a researcher is I'm specifically looking at rural Indigenous communities and how they are being affected by a lack of government funding, specifically dedicated to active transportation infrastructure. And this is all thanks to Vancouver Foundation, who is providing us with funding for this project. So this webinar is the start of a webinar series that we are doing throughout this year. And we're going to be exploring different topics related to trails and active transportation that affect Black, Indigenous, and people of color in British Columbia. So this webinar is being funded on behalf of the Real Estate Foundation, Environment and Climate Change Environment and Natural Resources Canada, the Vancouver Foundation, and the webinar software is being provided to us by Thompsons River University. So I'd just like to thank all the sponsors for helping us with this event. I would like to remind everyone that this event is being recorded and that the recording of this event will be emailed to you and will be available via our Trails BC Facebook page. We are encouraging everyone to ask questions in the chat box, and during the last 15 minutes of this presentation, our presenters, Tom and Patrick, will be answering your questions. Please be respectful. Any form of hate speech or derogatory remarks will not be tolerated, and you will be kicked from this event at the discretion of our moderators. With that being said, I'm going to pass the mic over to Tom and Patrick, and thanks again, everyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Damon, and thank you for everybody at BC Trails for putting this together and bringing us on board. We're super excited to be a part of this, and thank you to everybody out there who joined the webinar. It's really exciting for us to share our stories. So what I'd like to do is, how this will kind of roll is Tom and I, we kind of like to do this as a bit of a conversation between ourselves. We find that kind of works a bit better. Tom and I have spent a lot of time traveling around the province together, and whenever we're driving around in his truck, we have these amazing conversations, and invariably we solve all the world's problems. So we'd like to invite you into that and invite you into Tom's truck, and that's basically kind of how this is going to go. So we'll talk for a little bit and talk a little bit about our experiences. I'll talk a little bit specifically about, decolonization and what it means, or at least our understanding of it. And then, yeah, we'd love to take some questions. Before we get started here, and I think you should all have access to the chat box, I'd love to ask, throw in there where you're coming, what your connection to the trails world is, what kind of, who's the organization that you represent, and where you're coming from. And maybe, Damon, if you're able to see that, you can kind of say, hey, there's so-and-so from this organization, or just give us a bit of a sense of some of the answers that are coming in. So please go ahead and do that right now. It'd be great. We'd love to know where you're coming from. And I'm just going to see if I can share my screen.
We got a lot of different responses already. So
Awesome.
We got someone from Reno, Nevada.
Wow.
We got
Nice.
Algonquin College, Edmonton, East Van, North Van, Comox.
Oh, fellow Comox. Awesome. Yeah.
Oh, Vermont. Awesome.
Nice. Awesome. Wonderful. And myself,
San
I'm.
Francisco.
Oh, nice. Oh, wow. Getting some geographic representation. I love it. Anybody from outside of Turtle Island, outside of North America? Okay, well, while that's coming in, why don't we get started? So I'm calling in tonight from the unceded territories of the Comox First Nation on Vancouver Island, and I'm joined by my good friend and fellow trail enthusiast Tom Eustache. Yeah, let's get this started. So there we go. Perfect. So this all started 8, 9 years ago now. I started a program called the Indigenous Youth Mountain Bike Program. And the idea behind the program at that time is I was working with a small community called the Boothroyd Indian Band. They're a Lakatmuk community in the Fraser Canyon here in BC. And I was listening to them talk about their community, about the struggles that they were facing, and they were really worried about their youth getting involved with drugs and alcohol. And they asked me if I could help the youth in the community design a bike park. And it was an amazing experience just working with the kids, coming up with the idea and the design. And for me, that's kind of why I got into community planning. That's my background. I'm a professional community planner. So with that, I formed the Indigenous Youth Mountain Bike Program. And it was a bit of a, just kind of a naive, fancy idea that I would get to go out around the province and share my love of mountain biking and get kids out living healthy, active lives. And it really took off. But it became something quite different from what I had originally anticipated. And it's been an 8-year journey of really learning about what it means to live as a non-First Nation. I'm non-First Nation myself, settler Canadian, on Indigenous lands and what that can all mean and what that can look like. And part of that journey was meeting my good friend Tom and us working on trails together and learning about what that can look like for everybody involved. So we want to share some of that today. Mountain biking in BC has, a pretty interesting history, and it's one that mirrors in a lot of ways our settler colonial history in BC. We see these old sepia tone photos of riders, and mountain biking started here in BC with a group of mostly guys going up on the North Shore mountains and just kind of throwing themselves down whatever they could find, and it was kind of a new and virgin territory, and they got to go out and experience it in a new way. And the result has been pretty spectacular. It's grown a lot since that time, and BC has become known as the spiritual home of mountain biking and has some of the most amazing trails that you can find pretty much anywhere. And it's something that's really inspired a generation of riders and has launched mountain biking into a global phenomenon. Mountain biking started in California in Marin County, but it was really, I had a good friend of mine once say to me, Martin Littlejohn told me, it's like when it came to BC, it's when mountain biking really moved off the fire forestry roads and started becoming about trails. That was a really key shift in the movement. And at that time, there was a big pushback against that because things were happening in the forest. There was causing damage. There was conflicts with other users. So the mountain bike community had to get organized, and it had to grow into a community. And it was a pretty spectacular movement. But ultimately, the question comes down to this: is on whose land do we ride? I often hear people say like, we're just going out for a ride. We're just going to get out and we're just going out mountain biking. What could possibly be the harm from that? But every time we step out on the land, we are undertaking an explicit political act that is based on hundreds of years of history. And it has impacts today in what's happening around us. And it's important for us to start thinking about that. And whenever we talk about First Nation, we talk about reconciliation, ultimately we're talking about the land and who can go where and do what and the status around that. And when we're talking about decolonization, that's what we're talking about is how does it come to be that we've decided the certain laws that we have dictate who can go on the land and what they can do when they're there, and how does that impact other communities? And that's ultimately what we want to be talking about. So now what I'd love to do is, before I go any further, I'd really like to bring in Tom. And Tom, are you there? Are you unmuted? Are you able to join us?
I'm unmuted. Yeah.
Okay, there he is, Tom Eustache, the man. So Tom, maybe you want to introduce yourself a little bit and maybe tell us a bit about your people, the Simp people, and your own history with mountain biking and trails.
Yeah, I'm from a small place called Chuchua outside of Kamloops, about an hour and a half. Our territory spans from just outside of Kamloops all the way up to Jasper and outlying even just as far north and our west and east. We have a huge territory that we live in, and we've lived in forever. And that's where I've lived all my life and lived and worked and started mountain biking about, oh, I don't know, must be 15 years ago now, probably, and started building trail with my son. And in that time, I started riding probably before he did. He was involved in some other stuff and like swimming and stuff like that. He was busy doing that. And then we started riding when he got older. But then I met Patrick, and yeah, we started doing more and more trail building and created some trails outside of our community. About it's getting up closer to 18K now, I think, closer to 20K after last year. We built quite a bit of trail last year, and yeah, I've been riding bikes ever since then, and I can't get enough of it. It's just one of those things that I love doing, and so many other people love doing it. It's so easy to connect to people when you see them on a trail, and that's what they love doing. You know it. So yeah, that's who I am, and that's yeah. We have a fairly big territory that we do have all kinds of different user groups in it. So we've worked with a lot of them. So yeah.
I think one of the things that is an important part of our discussion is the history of your people, and I think it's important to highlight how your people, the Simp people, as part of the Secwepemc Nation, was inhabited a really large area. And back in, I think it was 1916, your people were forcibly removed from the territory in the northern end of your territory near the current community of Valemount. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about that and how it relates to the projects that we've been working on.
Yeah, our people were sort of lived up and down the whole valley. We moved in and out of different areas in the season for fishing, hunting, and we had a fairly big group that lived in the Valemount area and lived there forever and went back and forth to Jasper and up and down into Kamloops because we're a big nation, so we traveled all over the place. And in that year, they were forcibly removed and moved into our community of what we know now as Chuchua, and it's just a small reserve that they've put us on, had put us on then, and they took our people from up there. They marched them all the way down here on foot. The police moved them out of there and marched them down to here and said, "This is your new home." So being forcibly removed from an area, and now through mountain biking and other ways, but a lot of we've gone up, worked with people up and down the valley. So through mountain biking, that's how we discovered a lot of our territories, going out and riding in these different areas and bringing our youth out and doing that. And for them to discover, what lies in all of our territory, I think it's a huge thing. So, and they've never been able to do that in the past. Like this has opened up something new for them. So,
Yeah. I think that's one of the most important things about the work that we've done together is how your community has used trails and mountain biking to reconnect with your territories and reconnect your youth with your territories. And I think that's a part of when we talk about decolonization. It's about helping and supporting First Nation communities to reconnect with their territories. I think that's a really big part of it. And so our story, Tom and I together, we met in 2014, and I had been traveling all over the province after starting the Indigenous Youth Mountain Bike Program, and I was looking for a community that I could work on with trails. And I had a very set idea in my head about what that should look like, about what mountain biking and trails should look like. And we were going to create this Shangri-La of mountain biking. And I had been going around to all these different communities all over the province, and a lot of them were not terribly interested in what I was talking about. And they're like, "Yeah, that sounds really nice, but no thanks." And it was when I finally met Tom, and Tom was already building trails in the hills just above the Chuchua with his son Skylar and his nephew Leon, and he showed me the trails that they were building, and I was just blown away, and I thought they were so amazing. And I remember, Tom, I went to give you my pitch about we should make this destination, and you pretty much stuck a shovel in my hand and said, "Look, if you want to work with us, you have to dig first." And that was a big piece of it, because basically I had to stop trying to push my idea of what we were doing, and we spent the next 6 years building trails together. And it's been a long journey, and I think that's a big piece of it. And now in Simc, in Chuchua, they have built some of the most beautiful trails that we've seen around the province. And I love how now with the trails, you get a sense of, I love to call the Simp trail crew the trail weavers, because they really look at trails as something artistic and creative, and they weave a lot of like really fun elements into the trails, and it's quite beautiful. And as I said, they've created some of the most amazing experiences. I think, Tom, one of the things I'd love for you to talk a little bit about is how have these trails impacted your community? What changes have you seen in your community because of the trails?
Yeah, I think it's impacted not only me because I get to go out there every day. I work right beside the trailhead. So I can go out at lunchtime or right after work. If I have enough time after work, I can head around the trail and do a lap or a couple laps. So that's, in me, that's something, it's built something in me that I can, keep building on every day. And it's my fitness and my mental health. And it's done the same thing for a lot of other people in the community. They get out there, they get the experience of going out onto their land and seeing all what's up on the mountainside. A lot of them, younger people, have never gone up there and seen what's up there. So they're able to go out there, and there's a big group, the exercise group, that goes up there and runs, and they've been doing that for years now, and it's changed their lives. They're able to get out there every day and do that, and it gives them something to do, and it's affected their health. Like, they are way better physical shape than they've ever been, mentally healthy. Yeah, it's a huge thing for our community. It's I wish other communities could get into that and see that. It makes such a big difference. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a big part of it. When we talk about decolonization, what that possibly means, I think a big part of it seems to me, it comes down to health is a really big part of it. Colonialism has had a huge impact on the health and well-being of First Nations people and the ability to connect with their land. And I think that's part of that process. When you talk about decolonization, you're talking about helping communities heal.
Hey, Patrick, real quick, would you mind switching your presentation to presenter view, just so that the slides are easier for everyone to see?
Okay, let's see if I can take care of that. 1 second.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, Pat, share.
Does that work?
It still looks the same. Someone says if you go to the little blue toggle on the bottom left, you can move it to the content.
Toggle, I'm afraid I'm not sure what they mean.
I think they were referring to me. I get it.
Oh, okay.
It's all good. It was on my end. It's all good. Sorry.
Okay, so that's all good. Is that better now? Okay. Well, we'll let you play with that, Damon. We'll keep kind of going here, and hopefully we can get that improved. Yeah, and I think one of the exciting things there, Tom, is definitely seeing the community using it. Like, I think there's a group of 15 women in the community now who use the trails to go running.
Yeah, and now they also have we have a snowboard group that uses it in the off season of snowboarding to train and to stay in shape for snowboarding. We have a First Nation snowboard team that trains up at Sun Peaks, which is about an hour away from us, and they go up there every year and snowboard and compete in snowboard racing, and they use our trails and stuff there in the summer to go run on and train on. So yeah.
Nice.
So we have probably with them, there's probably a group now of closer to 30 people that use it regularly. And there's other families that just go out there and walk. Like, there's whole families that go out there and walk the whole trail, from grandparents to grandchildren. It's pretty cool. So
Nice.
especially now with COVID, like during this COVID time that we've been through where we're locked down and staying indoors, there's been so many other people that have gone out there and found that as a place that they can go to, and there's not a lot of people out there, so yeah.
Well, a key part of this for Tom and I think it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, we were just starting this process. And in BC, anyways, when you start to develop a trail system, often clubs, one of the first things they need to do is they need to go and work with a group called Recreation Sites and Trails, which, as far as provincial departments go, I think they're a great bunch of people, very progressive, and really just trying to get great trails built. But they are part of the provincial government, which is part of the colonial structure that we have to deal with. And I remember one of the person who came in to talk to us that day came in and put this document down on the table in front of us. And the one key word there is crown land. And I remember, Tom, you were there, and the band manager there was there, and I think the chief was there at the time. We all kind of looked at this and we're like, oh, what's going on? And he said, these are the rules. These are the rules you have to follow when you build trails. And that's kind of one of the key questions. If we're going to talk about decolonization, we have to deal with this issue. And the issue is being like, why it's, how do we come to this place that we consider it crown land? And for those of you who aren't from BC, or if you don't know this history, BC is literally unceded territory. And what that means is back in 1763, the British Crown, which had colonies set up across Canada, including in Victoria at that time, was really worried about American expansionism of the 13 colonies. So King George issued the Royal Proclamation of 1763 that basically said all the First Nations in North America at that time, they owned their territories. The territories was there, and only the British Crown could negotiate with them to basically take ownership of it. And that's, for a large degree, that's what happened across Canada. There was the numbered treaties that were signed, and in BC there was 14 small treaties that were signed for parts of Vancouver Island, and then they just stopped, and they didn't follow this process. And they never actually negotiated the surrender of the lands. And then eventually in 1858, around that time, there was a big gold rush and a lot of Americans coming up from the States, and the government got really worried. So they basically just claimed all of BC as part of the colony without ever discussing that with the First Nations or making any kind of treaty. And then that's why in the 1990s, we restarted that treaty process. So the territory here is literally unceded. So that's what we talk about. We say, well, Indigenous title has been recognized by the courts over and over and over again as something that existed before European contact and is still in place. And that's one of the key things. So when we talk about mountain biking and we talk about trails and we talk about how you get permission to build trails, where and when, it's participating in a colonial structure. So for here in BC, if you want to get a trail built, you have to go and get a permit, Section 56 or Section 57. Well, we can draw a direct line between those things and the colonial mindsets that gave us the idea that we could claim lands that didn't belong to us and that we didn't have to negotiate for them. So we can draw a line between those things right back to terra nullius and the concept of empty land, through the doctrine of discovery, the Royal Proclamation, all the way up to today. And that's when you go to work with First Nations, that's what they have in the back of their mind is, how is this going to impact our rights and title and our ability to assert that? Now, Tom, I know with your people, the Simp people, like you've made a lot of efforts and you've done a lot of work to assert your rights and title throughout your territories. And I wonder if maybe you want to talk a little bit about what that's been like and what that means for your people.
I've spent some time as a counselor on chief and council in our community, and through that time we've done a lot of negotiating with different areas, forestry and stuff like that, mining, Kinder Morgan, all of the other above, hydro, Ministry of Transportation, all of those things, but always keeping in our mind that we're negotiating on our territory. We're not negotiating with them for something. They're going to negotiate with us for something. And that's the way we've all thought about it. And it's served us well to this point. We're a really healthy community at this point. We have really low unemployment. We have some really healthy people that are doing a lot of different things and a really educated community. So I think that's really served us well to go that route. We've had some really great leaders in the community. That's what I think has brought us to this point. So yeah, that's how we looked at it. Is that people are going to be asking us for permission to do stuff, not us asking them for permission. So that's been a big thing. And that's not in a negative way either. It's working in a good way. Like we've worked with a lot of people in a good way, and we have some really good relationships up and down the valley because we've grown up side by side with a lot of the people that live here, farmers and people that worked in mills and everything like that. So we know a lot of the families and the family history. So it's not like some people are brand new here, but there's a lot of family history in this valley up and down. So they know of us and we know of them. So yeah, I think that's the other part that's worked out really well. So yeah.
I think one of the big takeaways that I really want people to take away from this presentation and this discussion is that there is an explicit link between colonialism and recreation and genocide, and it's not something that we are often taught or we think about. As I said before, a lot of time we think, well, we're just going out for a ride. What could be the possible harm? But throughout our history, there has been a very explicit link. And you think back to one of the big issues that happened in Canada. In 1989, there was this event called the Oka crisis. So for those of you who are outside of Canada might not be familiar with this, it started as a small town in Oka wanted to extend the development into an area called the Pines that had been long claimed by the Mohawk people. The land had actually been expropriated from them by the municipality years and years before, and they've been fighting to get it back. And they wanted to extend the development. And the Mohawk people blockaded a road leading to the development, and it set off a 78-day crisis that really gripped the country. And there was a firefight at one point between the Sûreté du Québec and the Mohawk, and an officer was shot and killed. And the military was brought in. This really created a huge crisis in Canada, and that development that they wanted to extend was a golf course. And that issue set off a wave of Indigenous activism that grew for the next 30 years. And the issue is still going on. The Pines and the issue of that development was just in the news the other day. So we can see where recreation is not always a benign thing. How it's developed can have huge implications. And another example would be much closer to home, and I think this is actually involves your people, Tom, right? The Sun Peaks and the Nisconluth, which are Secwepemc people. Mm-hmm. And this was back in the early 1990s. A company, Nippon Cable, wanted to expand a ski development, ski resort, and make it into a major ski resort. And the Nisconluth and the Secwepemc people opposed it. And there was a blockade and encampment on the site for many, many months, and there was arrests and people were imprisoned, and that now is a very popular mountain bike destination, and that's right in your backyard. That's part of your people. And another example that's slightly different is here in BC. There was this issue where at this area called Gustafson Lake, or Shepparton, and there was a group of Secwepemc people. Again, Tom's people, who had been using the area for years to engage in their traditional practices, and they were given an eviction notice by the landowner where they've been doing these activities for a long time. And again, a blockade happened. There was all kinds of problems with the police. At one point, the RCMP were caught on tape saying, they would smear the warriors and make them look as bad as possible. And this was a situation where you had a group of First Nations who were engaging in their cultural practices. Now, I mean, could you imagine the same thing happening when, say, a mountain bike club wants to build a trail? These things are handled quite differently, but we can see that there is this explicit connection between recreation and colonialism. And there's a strong history of that. And within Canada and North America, there have been agreements throughout our history where we've come together to say how we're going to share this land. And one of the great examples is the two-row wampum belt, which was done the Niagara Treaty, which was between Anishinaabe people and the Dutch. And their idea was that it was going to be a nation-to-nation agreement sharing the land. And that's often upheld as the type of relationship that we're supposed to have. So it does exist. And then again, with the Royal Commission in 1996, after the Oka crisis, the government put together a commission that looked at the relationship of the government and First Nations, and they issued a proclamation stating a commitment to a new relationship, which, among other things, called for an Aboriginal parliament and all kinds of recommendations to fix the issues, and those things were never implemented. So, and then we had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which really calls to restore land's economic self-sufficiency for First Nations and to develop that positive relationship. And they had something like, I think it's 92 recommendations, and very few of them actually have been implemented. Among which some of those recommendations include respecting Indigenous territories and making sure that Indigenous people are involved in those actions. And of course, now we have the UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And this could be a major new movement. Both the BC government and the government of Canada have called in legislation to enact it, but it really comes down to whether or not they actually respect those principles and move forward on them. And I think that's going to be one of the key things. So I think for all of us, it really comes down to how do we want to engage in these issues and force the government to move forward on it. So I think, Tom, one of the things I really wanted to ask you and get your thoughts on this, and I'm sure everybody would be really interested in hearing about this, is in terms of your territory, like how would you like for clubs and trail advocates to approach your community when it comes to wanting to develop trails or do things in a better way?
I think if they came to us first and talked to us first before they went to rec sites and trails or anything else that they're going to do, I think that would make it a lot better, because you'll find that we're us anyhow are open to a lot of things. So open to different partnerships and have the resources to help people out, not only depend on other things, but also do stuff. So I think that's what we'd like to do in our community, is have that first, because it makes things a lot easier. Instead of having hard feelings because Patrick didn't come and ask me first and he went and asked somebody else. Yeah. But that is very true in our territory. We try to encourage that if we can, because we're willing to work with a lot of different different areas, and we have a lot of capacity in our community to do that. So that's how we want things, and things have to get done that way.
I think for me, and I think one of the key things I've learned from working with you and other First Nations around the province is that when it really comes down to the idea of decolonization, is not only about really helping First Nations and supporting their efforts to reconnect with their territories, but it really comes to taking those legislative policies, the procedures that the government has put in place to decide who can use the land and when, and working with First Nations first and foremost to make sure that it's being done properly. I think is one of the most important things. I seem to have lost my presentation, but that's okay. I think, and one of the last things I really wanted to say is I've had different clubs approach me over the years, and I remember some of the things I've had people say to me is they'd like to see one set of rules that governs what happens in the province. So if you're, maybe you're a hunter or you're an angler or you're a mountain biker, you want to know that the same rules are going to apply all over the province. And in and of itself, that is kind of that is the colonial ideal. Like, it's the idea that we can instill one set of rules around the province. And I think one of the most important things I've learned from First Nations, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Tom, is how, back in the day, you would never just assume that you were going to go to the next territory over and do whatever you wanted. There were protocols involved with doing that.
Today, there's even protocols. When we went to Williams Lake and we were going out of my territory, I told Patrick, I'm not going to go there until you get an okay from them that I go into their community, because before we used to be at war with them, and there was some bad blood, but it's just doing things in the right way. And it ended up happening that we went into the community and we had a blast there, and yeah, and we still go out to those communities and made great relationships. So that's how we did it, and that's how I think other people should do it, because I asked permission before I went into their territory. So, and that's what we used to do in the past. It wasn't just a given that we just went and wandered around wherever we wanted to. So, yeah.
Well, I think that's a key piece to understand. I travel around the province quite a bit, and I'll go ride different areas. And the truth is, I don't always ask each community, can I have permission to come to your trail to ride on these or the dates? But what I do engage in is I always try to learn about the First Nation where I am going to go and ride in their territories, and gain an understanding of how they feel about those trails. And I'll talk to the local clubs. I really encourage them to build those relationships. And if I do find out that there is a trail system that a local First Nation is really not happy about and they don't want people riding there, I won't ride those trails. And I think that can be part of it. And it can be kind of a scary thing to be like, well, do we have to do this with every First Nation all over the province? And it's like, yeah, you do. But that's the decolonial process. That's saying that we're going to make partnerships with everyone on whose territories we play. And I think that's where local clubs can play a really big part of that. And if you are going and riding in other trails or going and visiting other areas, part of your responsibility is to encourage the clubs there to do that, and to make part of going and visiting those trails knowing that it's being done in the right way, and staying away from those areas where it hasn't been. And that can be hard. Like, I want to be able to go and ride Burns Lake or wherever, and they've done a great job up there of making relationships. I want to make sure I'm not saying they haven't, but that's a part of the decision-making process for me. What else would you say people should be thinking about in terms of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think the big thing, I keep going back to it, is working with the First Nations and finding out what they need. I think if you're having a hard time to connect with them, find out what they need. Connect with someone there. Get a hold of someone. If you're a club, get a hold of someone there, and just keep trying to get a hold of someone that you can talk to and find out what they need. And sometimes they might not want to talk to you, but yeah.
I think, and so this will be the last piece I'll say, and then Damon, I think we can take it to questions. But I remember once, Tom, you called me up one day and you said to me, I need you and Thomas. And so everybody knows Thomas is another key part of our team. Thomas Schoen, he's an amazing trail builder from Williams Lake, and he's worked very closely with Tom and I over the years. And Tom, you asked us to come up and build a learning circle. And I remember thinking at the time, well, I mean, you guys can do that. You know how to build that stuff. And you're like, no, I need you guys to do this. We came up and we built this circle. And then I remember later finding out that you were using that as part of Orange Shirt Day. And for those of you who don't know, Orange Shirt Day is a very important day here in BC and across Canada. Today we commemorate what happened in the residential school systems here in Canada and the impacts of that. And I remember seeing a picture from it, and you had taken your youth out to the learning circle, and that's where you did Orange Shirt Day. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was something that our school initiated. They wanted a outdoor learning area, and at the time I just wanted to get it done, and then I didn't have the time to do it, but it was a crunch thing that they wanted to get done right away, and I was insistent that Patrick and Thomas come out and do it because they wanted to get it done. I'm always relying on the key people in our community to get things done for me. Like if I want to get a letter of support done, I badgered them to get it done, and I do that. So they were asking me to do something finally, and I had to get it done. So the urgency was there, and I think it was so important to get it done, and now it's actually paying off in a relationship that we've grown, because now over the last few days, we put it on in another. Thomas was putting something else out, but he needed a letter of support, and so they asked me for the trail plan that we did, and we put it on there, and there were some pictures of the learning circle, and they said, oh yeah, he's the one that built that. So that key thing where they remember who Patrick and Thomas are now. A lot of other people in the community remember who they are, but to have that where they have a face to put to all these things that go on. and someone they can trust. I think that's a big, big one, is growing that trust.
Yeah. I think it really spoke to me in that at the time I didn't fully appreciate it, and I keep going back and I keep looking at that photo of the kids listening to the elders talk about the history and what had happened, and telling them about being forcibly removed. And to me, it really struck me as that is an amazing opportunity, a gift that you really gave Thomas and I, that we were able to support your efforts to help your community heal and move forward. And I think that's one of the most important things if we're striving to, be involved in this and foster reconciliation or foster decolonization. The one thing that we as non-First Nation people can come to understand is that we can be a part of that healing process. We can bring healing to this land, but first we have to spend a lot of time listening. And as I said before, the most critical thing I think I did and that you taught me is to let go of my preconceptions of what mountain biking should look like and really respond to the needs of the community. And that's when we ended up getting aunties out running and elders out walking. And I think that was one of the really big critical pieces that I really want people to understand. So I think what we'll do now, unless you have any more comments, Tom, we'll open it up.
Just have one more comment.
Yeah, okay.
One more comment that it sort of triggered something in my head thinking about that when you're saying, with us all together. I think when we go out, me, you, Thomas, and whoever else comes with us, Martin, I never think of us as being different races. I never see Patrick as being white, and we tease Thomas about being German, but that's just different. But I don't see it as that. I see it as all of us getting together as a group of friends and going out and doing that. And I think that's the way mountain biking brings people together. And I think that's what we're looking at when we talk about it here is mountain biking bringing all walks of culture together, not only First Nations and white people, but also other groups of people. You looked at that picture from a group of people sitting there. That was Thompson Rivers University outdoor group, and they had 2 Canadians in the group. Everybody was from somewhere else in Canada, and they come up and built just about 3/4 of a kilometer trail in a day and a half.
Yeah.
So having that big group of people come out and they wanted to come out. There's some that came out voluntarily later, just said, "Oh, what a cool place to come out to," and asked if they could come back. And that's what it's about to me, what it gets down to. Yeah.
Yeah. Hold my hands up to you. Amazing. So Damon, if you want to jump in here, I think we'd be happy to take some questions.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we got a few from the crowd here. So yeah, thank you both. That was great. And thank you so much, Tom. I thought that was such a positive way to, kind of end this part of the presentation, at least before moving on to Q&A. That was very, very well put. Very beautiful. So we have a question from Gunnar. Let me just find it here. And it's in relation to land acknowledgements. And he's wondering how land acknowledgements can be properly used and whether or not that's kind of just signage or, maybe like a plaque with an acknowledgement on it. So, Tom or Patrick, if you want to speak a little bit on that.
Tom, do you want to start that one off?
Yeah, I think for us, it's having something out there that shows the history of who we are and where you are. When you're standing on that trail, where you are and what territory you're in and who are the people that lived there forever. I think that's the acknowledgement that I like to see at the beginning of a trail, just to say this is part of Simp territory. And these are Simp people. That's for us, that's really cool because it says something to our younger people when they get to those trails and go to ride them and they say, wow, they're acknowledging that this is our territory. Like they can't grasp that. So it's educating the young too. And I think even non-First Nations young, which needs to go forward from here now on, them having all of this knowledge going forward, I think it makes a way better place to live. So, yeah.
Yeah. And we've seen quite a few clubs here in BC are doing that now. And I think it's so important it can be really powerful for a whole bunch of different reasons. And I think it does become really important for the non-First Nation, the settler community as well. Like I see a lot of people taking a lot of pride in the trails where they ride. I once I was at a ride in Souk on Vancouver Island, and we were all, and for a long time they called this one hill, it was called Broom Hill, which is ironically named after an invasive weed. And it was we learned from the chief of the Souk, Gordon Planis, who told everyone like this is our sacred mountain. This is like our church. Like this is a really important place to us. And I was saying to someone afterwards, like, oh yeah, we're gonna go ride Broom Hill, and someone said to me, hey man, that's sacred mountain. Show some respect. And people it becomes very important to them. And I think we're trying to build up those relationships. Understanding whose territory you're riding on can be very powerful. Any more questions there, Damon?
Yeah, for sure. So we have another question. This one's from Carly, and she's asking, does asking permission look like approaching elected council?
Oh,
Asking permission to, you mean asking elected council? I don't think you're able to get to that point right away. I don't think that asking permission. I think at the end of the day, it is because those people represent the whole community. They don't just represent themselves, and they don't make. In our community, that's the way it works. Anyhow, they don't just make decisions. When I was on there, I was making a decision for the whole community, and whatever the community wanted, that's what we did. It wasn't my part to make that whole decision. So you're sort of asking the whole community when that goes forward. So yeah, I hope that answered some of it.
I think it's one of the key things is different First Nations have different governance setups and different protocols. So some have hereditary chiefs, some have elected chief and council. And I think I saw a follow up in the questionnaire is like, who do you approach? And I think that can be a really a process that you have to take care of. And it's not something you can immediately jump in on. Usually when I'm first reaching out to a community to get this kind of a discussion started, often I'll look at the website and figure out who to approach. There might be a lands officer, there might be a youth coordinator is often a good place to start, and you can talk about getting their kids out riding. But having a presence in the community, so often a local First Nation will have like Aboriginal Day, like go to those events. Make your presence known, attend their events whenever you can, and you'll figure out who you need to talk to and ask to from there. But one of the most important things I always say is don't wait until you need something. The first words out of your mouth going to a community shouldn't be, do I have permission to ride your land? Because you're probably going to get a no, because they don't know who you are. It's really important to go, to start things off. Like one of the great examples I use is in Williams Lake here in the interior of BC. There's the Williams Lake Mountain Bike Club, and for years, and I'm talking 20 years, the guys there like Mark Savard and Thomas Schoen, our good friend, they spent years going to all the different reserves around there and holding mountain bike club clinics. So they'd fix everybody's bikes, or they'd show the kids how to ride, or they'd build a small pump track. They would just do things for the communities without the expectation of return, and they would build up those relationships so that when the time came, they knew who they should go and talk to. What do you think about that, Tom? Like, is that something that you would say resonates with your community and other Secwepemc communities?
I think it is. I think it really is because we had that experience with Mark, and we went up to a community and we got there and they said, "Oh, was Shreddy coming out with you guys?" And we said, "Oh no, not today." "Oh, geez, too bad." So we got sort of shunned. So making those inroads with people, I think, is really important because if you go out and do that stuff, I'll remember what your name is. I remember from people, there's people that from Kamloops that still come out and do just trail work with us, or they'll come out and do films. We'll just go do something, and doing that and promoting something positive in a community, I think, is huge. Like Pat was saying, even going to one of their events, like they might have a job fair or something. Go there and set up a table and just say who you are if you're a bike community. Yeah.
Yeah, really important.
Yeah,
Another
for
question
sure.
for David?
Yeah, definitely. I just want to thank everyone in the chat. They're sharing a lot of different resources for just gaining a better understanding of, whose land they're on, like nativeland.ca, for a better understanding of land acknowledgements. And those are great resources to use. Very helpful for when you're traveling, or if you just are not aware of all the nations that call where you're residing home. So good stuff to know. So we have a question regarding cycling clubs. And so how can cycling clubs work respectfully on nation homeland when the majority of nation members are hundreds or thousands of miles away? Is it just emailing the tribal government? Is that a burden on the nation?
So I imagine this must be coming from the States, although that does happen here in BC as well. I do think we need to be very careful, and Tom, I'd love you to jump in on this. We do need to be very careful about placing a burden on communities. Often First Nation communities have a lot of stuff that's happening. There's a lot of issues that they need to deal with, and we just may not be on the radar for that. But I think ultimately, Tom, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Like, making that effort is always going to be worth it in the end, and I think it's just something we have to be consistent about. And one thing I always say to clubs is be proactive, and try and engage with First Nations as early in the process as you possibly can, and be consistent. Keep going back. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I think that is because there's a lot of communities that are smaller and don't have the resources to do a lot of the stuff that need. So also offering them to find a way to find resources to do that. You might be able to employ someone there to be able to do something like that. So going that route where you're helping out instead of being sort of a hindrance, because sometimes it's just a lot of paper that goes across the desk. Like Pat sends me something that says, "Hey, I want to get this done." I said, Jesus, this guy again. Like, if I didn't have the time and drive, and I would probably not accept it. If wasn't a mountain biker, it would be really tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that is one of the critical things that we do is we work with, when we work with First Nations, we often help them raise funding to engage in the process. Like, there's clubs here in BC that have done that, where a First Nation has said, we'd really like to help you with, legalizing these trails, but we don't have the capacity and the funds to pay our archaeologists to go out and do that. So the local club would raise the funding to help with that, or they would employ some of the youth to work on the trail building team, so that there was ways of building that capacity. And sometimes that's what we have to get very creative and how can we add to their capacity rather than simply becoming a burden on it. And I think that's really important.
I think in BC here anyhow, if you're doing the trail planning, look into that. Maybe add that portion into your trail budget when you're going to build, is that having that building that capacity to do some of the archaeology stuff. And it goes a long ways to helping people out. We even struggle with that now, but we have a lot of different areas that we're doing our archaeology stuff in. So sometimes things have to wait when we have a request from one of the cycling communities to do something. Sometimes they'll have to wait a bit because we don't have the resources to do it at that given day that they want it. So I think doing some planning beforehand is huge too, because then it doesn't put that burden on them of having an expectation of getting it done right away. It doesn't always happen that you don't get things done that time that you ask. Sometimes it takes a long time.
Yeah.
And I think building that relationship with those people that you need to goes a long ways too. It takes a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, Patrick, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Just another good question here. So, given that mountain biking tourism is becoming increasingly popular, and these new trail projects will likely bring lots of other trail users, specifically non-Indigenous trail users, how do you approach these projects in order to keep the focus on Indigenous communities and ensuring that you cater to their needs and desires first?
Yeah, that's wow, that's a huge one, and I think really important. Because we do see that in different places where, and when I first started getting into this space, tourism was kind of where I was coming from, and I would go to, I'd go to a First Nation community and we talk about doing a really big trail system, and it's gonna be great, and all these tourists are gonna come here, and all these people and money and awesome, and the elders would typically be like, no, no thanks, like we're not interested. That's more garbage on our land. That's more, problems for us. And in other places where the trails actually did get built and the First Nation wasn't involved at all, they don't have any connection to it. They don't end up using it. So that becomes another really challenging part. What I learned is, so where it started to change for me is when I was working with the First Nation community and they were telling me, it's like, oh man, we have all these mountain bike clubs coming to us and they really want to do this, but we're really not comfortable with it. I would tell them, it's like, well, let's forget about that for now. Like, let's just build some trails for you and your community, build something that your people want to use, that your kids are going to get out on. And we would train up the youth, and we'd build like some small little trail just around the community. And then what would happen is, as the community saw their kids building the trails and using the trails, and they started using the trails, they would come back to us and say, okay, you know what? We want to build more trails. Now we're excited. And we would build the trails with them in mind and their uses in mind. And what we end up with, and this is true of any community that's trying to build tourism, there's no such thing as a mountain bike destination that doesn't have a really strong culture around mountain biking. If you build trails that your community loves and they're using, they're going to maintain those trails, they're going to keep care of those trails, and people want to come and ride those trails. Those are the trails that get used and loved. And I think, what Tom, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because you guys have never really done your trails for tourism, but you are getting a lot of visitors, and we have started that discussion.
Yeah, we've been getting more and more people out over the last few years, discovering like our valley here. When we first started, there's very few trails. Like Valemont, I think, was just starting. There were some old trails that were used for filming and stuff, but other than that, there was not much in the valley. And now the valley's grown so much. Clearwater has, I don't know how many kilometers of trails, and same with Valemont, and Blue River is just going to start. So that's all in the valley that I live in. So all of these people are passing through and they see trail forks, they'll click it on and hey, there's some trails in Sim. So they'll show up. I see people showing up from Alberta, from all over. People from the United States just happen to be popping by because they see it on trail forks. Now, wouldn't that be cool on trail forks if it said you're entering Simp territory or whatever territory that you're going? Wouldn't that be something? But that's what happens in our communities, that people are showing up there. But I think having enough signage up there to remind people that have the respect for the people that are walking there or using the trails, because it's not just young people, it's older people that are up there walking, and having that respect. And it's okay to stop and say hi to people and ask them what they're doing. And people definitely do that with they see people coming in and say, hey, what are you guys up to? And they'll say where they're from. And then I get to work Monday and they'll say, hey, there was these people on Saturday that were here from wherever. And they know our people are always interested in where people are from. They realize that it is the trails are being used from outside communities. And for the most part, everyone that I run into, usually I'll go talk to them and I'll say, hey, is it all right if we use your trails? And I always, respond, oh, definitely. It keeps down the weeds and stuff. So, but I think that's a key thing, to have signage up and have it on as much media as you can, that, you're to respect the area when you're there, and to respect, especially if the trails are in a community like they are in ours. The majority of our trails are on our actual land that the government has set aside for us, our reserve. And some of it goes outside of that, but that's not here nor there. We just built it where we seen the cool areas that we could build in. So so it's And I don't know if a lot of other communities are like that. I know Kamloops is probably getting close to that. I know that there's a lot of really cool area that you could build in their community. So I think having that signage there for people to respect where they're at. I think for the most part, bikers do. Some people that hike and stuff don't always, that are bringing their dogs and stuff out. They don't pick up after themselves a lot of times. For our trails, we don't see no garbage and stuff. So I think having that respect, I think, is a big thing. So
Yeah. I think the final thought I wanted to add to that is I think with SIMP, we particularly like, I always call it the running anti-factor, because we are able to build the trails that is being used by your people in the community, and particularly the group of women who all run together, and we call them the running aunties. Like, they engender a sense of pride and ownership over those trails that we couldn't otherwise get. And where I see other communities where they bring in an outside professional trail builder who builds this really beautiful set of trails, but the local community, the local First Nation folks don't have any part in that. They didn't build them. They didn't have any sense of connection to them. Those are the trails that often end up being unused and unmaintained. And I think that can be a real danger. So Damon, I think unless there's any other questions, maybe this might be a good time to wrap this up. We're just over an hour. We're starting to lose people, so it might be a good time to stop.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's worth wrapping it up. Sorry to kind of cut off this good back and forth, but yeah, it's funny, Tom, that last comment that you just had on acknowledgements on trail forks and stuff. It's ignited this whole conversation in the chat, and everyone's talking about it and how it's such a great idea. So you might have started a movement here.
nice.
Yeah. So yeah, I just want to thank you, Tom Eustache and Patrick Lucas. I really appreciate both of you for speaking here tonight. And yeah, I just want to give you guys both another shout out. You both do amazing work, and you know, we're just so grateful that you have the ability to, you know, share your knowledge with all these people. So I just really appreciate that. And so just another quick reminder that the recording of this event will be sent to everyone via the email that you used on Eventbrite. Whatever email you registered to, it'll be sent to that email, and it will also be available with the Trails BC Facebook page. If you would like to support Trails BC, please become a member. I will put the link within the chat right now. There it is. And yeah, just by becoming a member, it really means a lot to us as Trails BC. We're a nonprofit, we're a charitable organization, and you know, by becoming a member, you assist us a lot by helping us with events like these first and foremost, and then also helping us with our advocacy efforts. So it would really mean a lot if you registered to become a member. Also, just a heads up, we're going to be hosting a symposium in April from the 15th to the 17th. So please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at TrailsBC for information on that. So yeah, with that, I think we're done. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, and just let everybody know, by all means, follow our organization, the Indigenous Youth Mountain Bike Program. You know, someone asked in there if we do talks like this to school groups. We absolutely do. You can reach us through Facebook or through our website, Indigenous Youth Mountain Bike Program. We're always happy to hear from folks. I'll make the slides from this show available to you, Damon, as a PDF. You can throw that out there with the other information that it goes out. Yeah, and thank you everyone so much for joining. Thank you, Tom. It's always so much fun doing this with us. You know, hands up, Kook Stemp, and let's talk.
Guys, thank you. Thank you, Damon.